Recently, there was Virat Kohli crying on the field. And there's so much talk about it because he's a human being. It does not matter whether he's a man or a woman or another gender. For example, I have clients who are in their 50s and 60s who end up crying in a session. And they're like, I've not cried for the last 40 years. And that does not make him a weaker man just because he's crying.
Whether it was a disturbed mind or a depressed mind, I didn't know. Because the nights felt extremely long and mornings felt very, very dark for me.
I know very specifically I went and I sat with my partner after a session and I didn't talk to her. I just sat there and I just cried.
Would we say that attachment or addiction has a lot to do with how upset your mind is?
You know, a lot of people say they watch Friends, the TV show, a lot.
We were on a break.
Okay. You know, Ross, why don't you just put that on your answering machine?
They watch it 100 times, they're going to watch it again because they know what's going to happen. If you feel like there are certain dependencies or coping mechanisms that you're doing, you have increased your smoking, alcohol or recreational drugs, all of those are like symptoms to tell you something is not okay.
You know when is Men's Day? Okay, clearly we have a Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, means that the mind is a lot more important and that defines the man. All right. Sit back, buckle up and brace yourselves. This is Chennai Live 104.8 and my name is Rajiv. Now, for a change, this 1 hour is all about men. So women, you better listen up. When we use this word man, there are few words that come to our mind. It could be authority, it could be success, it could be money, it could be power, it could be fame, it could be ambition. These are words primarily associated with a man. But there is one word, or there's rather one feeling in a man that's hardly spoken about but needs to be heard for sure. And that's why we believe that this month, celebrated as Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, needs a discussion today, tomorrow, for the month and for the year as well. To discuss all of this, we have a man talking to a man-to-man conversation, a mental wellness expert and a therapist, Mr. Rohit Koliyot. Welcome and welcome to Chennai Live. How are you?
Doing well, Rajiv.
When we say, how are you? First of all, this question, I believe, has been abused, misused and overused because the answer really is spoken without even thinking. Whenever we cross, how are you? I'm fine. Once when we ponder and ask ourselves, actually, how are we? That's when I think we mind. And now let me re-ask you the question, how are we today? How is society today actually?
I mean, it's a very interesting point you brought out, Rajiv. I mean, our natural response is not just protecting ourselves, but also protecting the possible feelings of the people who are asking us as well. So if you were to ask me, how are you? And I told you I'm feeling sad, I don't know whether you're actually ready to hear that or you have enough time and space to hold that for me, which is why automatically I'm saying I'm good and I'm doing okay, to tell you, to also kind of keep that space for you. And to answer your larger question of how are we as society, I think we're all hanging in there because that's all that we can do at this point of time.
You know, what has changed so much? Because the talk of the mind today, ever since COVID has hit, has become a lot of conversations. It could be like, this was something that needed to be spoken about. It needed a reason, it needed an occasion, it needed a conversation to start. And finally, it started off. But is it this era that is so mentally disturbed, saturated, depressed and confused? Or was it always there, but really never spoken about, and today we're speaking about it?
I think I'm going to answer all your questions with multiple perspectives. One, I think it's always been there. We as human beings, and as we have evolved, our mind, as you know, has always been there. So we've always had challenges or issues that have possibly changed over time depending on what the circumstances are or what the era, as you mentioned, are. Today, maybe we have certain reasons that we kind of attribute towards the larger awareness and openness about speaking about it. But fundamentally, yeah, we've we've always had minds, so we've always had challenges on how to deal with the mind as well.
I think depression, they say, is an illness, right?
You're right.
But I think depression, or a lot of people believe, it's a stage of an emotion. First is you're not too happy, a little disappointed, you become sad, become depressed. Then I think it's stages. But they say, however, this is an illness, this is a treatment that needs to be given. Now, talk to me, have you become mentally weak today? Have you been so pampered by society and so attached to success that anything that doesn't go our way takes us to the extreme end of the scale? Have we stopped getting used to, maybe it's not my day, maybe this was not meant for me, sometimes maybe God had better plans for us? Today, if it's not our way, it's depression. She doesn't love me, I'm depressed. I didn't get the job, I'm depressed. It's become those two extremes. Talk to me about what is depression, first of all. Is it levels of disappointment?
So I think what you mentioned in the beginning, that it is an illness, and we very colloquially use the word depression for when we are sad or when we are upset. So on some level, there are certain levels to it. And without getting too clinical about the depression aspect of it, I'm going to tell you, we all have certain kinds of thoughts which are possibly depressive thoughts, which are like, oh, I'm feeling really sad is a depressive thought. And there are different intensities to some of these kinds of thoughts. But when it gets clinically diagnosed, there are certain parameters that need to be followed for you to be clinically depressed, right? But we very easily, casually use the word depressed without realizing the severity of it. And to answer your second question with regard to, is it an extreme that if something does not work out, I am depressed, is a very easy thing to say, because you're also trying to elicit a response from the person that you're stating it to. And when you also feel overwhelmed, we don't fully know what that exact feeling is. So like you mentioned in the beginning, very rarely do we look inwards about how we are feeling. So an easy, all-encompassing word could be, I'm depressed, which is, I could be upset, I could be sad, I could be overwhelmed, I could be angry. Or like you said, sometimes it's just one day that I just want to lie in bed. That does not mean that you are depressed.
Correct. When is Men's Day? You know when is Men's Day? Okay, clearly we have a Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, means that the mind is a lot more important and that defines the man. But Men's Day, Women's Day, we had them. The fact that we have a Men's Mental Health Awareness Month itself means that this is not something that's going to be sorted in a day. It's not an overnight solution. It's not a 24-hour celebration. It is something that needs to be spoken, discussed, pondered, and worked upon. Is a man's mind as different as a woman's mind that we're talking about men's health? And why genre specific or gender specific have we gone?
So I'm again going to answer it in two ways. So one is, I just want to set the stage here a little bit to say that it is really amazing that there's so much more awareness around mental health, and having a specific day or a month for a specific gender does not mean that one gender is better than the other or suffering more than someone else. So I would kind of reframe this a little bit to say that this month is when we're focusing on one gender of the many genders that we have, to focus on the possible different kinds of challenges and issues that they may be facing from a mental perspective. Because it can very easily be framed as, because of our conditioning that men have to be strong or men have to do this. And so it's not a comparison is what I'm trying to say, one. Two is with regard to the second question you asked about do different genders have different kinds of challenges? Absolutely. Because all our challenges come from the kind of, if I look at it a little from a science perspective, it's like a blueprint that we have. And there's different kinds of things that go into making the blueprint. So everything from our social conditioning to our parents, to the schools we go to the kind of environment we're part of, the friends that we have, the kind of media that we consume, kind of condition us and wire us in a way to be more resilient or to respond to certain kinds of challenges. So, for example, in India, and like you mentioned, a man is supposed to be the sole breadwinner, right? Traditionally, I'm not saying that's the case anymore. Or, the man's not supposed to cry. We had the statements when we were
Stereotypes, images.
Don't be a girl. And if a man shows
Be strong, you're a man. Yeah.
exactly, right? Which is all changing. There's a lot of openness and awareness to it, which is changing, which is amazing. Like, I'm sidestepping a little bit. Like, recently there was Virat Kohli crying on the field, and there's so much talk about it because he's a human being. It does not matter whether he's a man or a woman or another gender. And there are the same kinds of emotions and feelings that all of us as human beings have because fundamentally we're all the same. So some of these external layers are the ones that kind of like stop us or stop certain people from responding or reacting in particular kinds of ways. So the answer is yes and no. The mind, the heart, all of it is the same. But the way we react to situations may be different based on different kinds of conditioning and circumstances.
Like you use the word conditioning, I'm using the word characteristic. Some people are very emotional when they see someone poor, they see a pet hurt, they see a child upset. You start exchanging those emotions. Some are they say the word emotionally strong, more logical thinking. So does it affect your mental health? Are you for a better mental health, for more stability of the mind? Are you saying don't be so emotional? Is that the message that's coming to the world? Don't be so emotional. Don't be so attached. Don't make yourself happy for small things. Don't make yourself sad for the small rejections. Are we trying to tell the world don't get emotional? That's the solution for mental health. Is that a vibe being sent out?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of like positivity or toxic positivity that's being pushed out. And that definitely should not be the vibe if that's the case that's being pushed out. Because emotions are a way of us expressing. So, for example, I have clients who are in their 50s and 60s who end up crying in a session. And they're like, I've not cried for the last 40 years. And that's almost like there's a release that's happening in that specific kind of session. And that does not make him a weaker man just because he's crying, because he's still a human being. So reacting and responding in a way that's natural for you is very, very important. Because say something very overwhelming happens to you, you could respond to it. I'm going to give you two easy examples. You could respond to it either by getting really angry and showcasing that anger because there's something inside you, you don't know what it is, and you're going to get angry. Or you could react in a very different way, which is, start crying or, getting really upset or shutting down, right? I'm giving you just two parts of it. Both are okay on some level. And we can't say that the getting angry is wrong or the crying is wrong. But what happens after that is what is really, really important. Is your anger and the way you're expressing anger unhealthy or toxic? Is that affecting people around you? Is the way that you're crying or shutting down toxic or affecting the people around you? And that's where the issues start happening, not in the actual expression of how you're emoting your feelings.
They say wait for the good time, and I kind of believe the time has already passed. The time to talk about expressing yourself, what you actually feel, and finding that comfort zone in somebody. I always believed until few months back that a therapist is not required, most inessential to one person's life, because depression has been overhyped. I mean, if you're sad, you can go for a movie, read a book, dance, music. We have all of this. Until reality actually, Rohit, hit me a few months back. And it took a lot to come to terms with this is what is actually happening. Whether it was a disturbed mind or a depressed mind, I didn't know. Because the nights felt extremely long and mornings felt very, very dark for me. Food had no taste. The job had no interest. The days felt like such a war to fight. 24 hours felt like a battle. And people around me said, what's wrong with you? You have the money, you have the job, you have people who are listening to you. Something is wrong with you. And then I realized, yes, something is wrong with me. It's not like I'm not grateful. It's just that I have hit this stage of life, or this emotion in my life, which was, I understood, depression. And it's not a cool thing to touch. It's a very bad phase to be in. And that's when I thought I probably have friends and family to go to. But then my friend might not want to hear this side of me. My family would not accept this side of me. Who do I go to? And I was advised to go to a professional. And that's where I believe that therapists have actually come out to be saviors. In today's world where time is so precious, where we can give everything to everybody we love, but time is something that we hardly are accepting to share. I think that's the birth of therapists. That's why we are thriving, because personal bonds, family and friends are not the same as they were before. Relationships are not as deep as they were before. Is that the birth of therapists today?
Before I start, I want to thank you for sharing what you went through, because and since we're also on the topic of talking about men's mental health, and one of the key things is that most men don't feel safe enough to talk about it. And the fact that you're doing this on camera and talking about a possibly challenging time in your life is a very big step, and is very promising for the kind of awareness that we're hoping to create around mental health and some of these kind of challenges. So thank you for trusting us and the audience for.
In your way, I'll answer this in two ways. The way you've been going on. I went to a therapist for the first time in my life. I didn't tell my family, I didn't tell my friends I'm going there. I thought they'll think I'm crazy, and I'm always happy, I'm always laughing, I'm the life of the room, I'm the energy of a party. How can I tell them I'm going for something like this? I went to a therapist, and I was thinking to myself, what the hell will the therapist tell me? I'm the best listener, I'm the best speaker. What will they tell me? I had a conversation with zero expectations, to be honest. But then I realized the effect is not my 60 minutes. The effect is what happens after the 60 minutes. The way I started thinking, the way I started perceiving, the perspectives changed so much. And after a couple of sessions, today I believe that I'm better. But there are nights that suddenly take you by surprise. There are things you see, there are moments that haunt you, and you know that depression is an illness that you probably will never be able to come out of completely. Because as long as emotions live, as long as you have feelings, as long as you have thoughts, as long as you can flash back to memories, you cannot come out of depression. But with a therapist, you can deal with situations so much more stronger. You can make yourself and not break yourself, is what I have understood through all of this.
Absolutely, Rajiv. And I'm going to connect this back to what the first question you asked me. Why do I need a professional to help me with this, right? Because you could have your partner, you could have your best friend, you could have your friends that you go play tennis with, you could have, the colleagues that you work with, and you could share different kinds of things with different kinds of people. But then there are also certain kinds of masks and images that you kind of keep with each of these relationships, right? And ideally, in an ideal therapeutic relationship, you don't have any masks, because the entire therapeutic space is a good therapist is supposed to be completely objective. So if you're telling me something deeply personal, my job as a therapist is not to tell you whether what you're thinking is right or wrong. Right? And that's the fear that most of us hold, the fear of judgment, the moment I share that with, say, a friend or someone else. And to kind of encompass this answer completely, I would say you don't need just a therapist, you need all of them. You need the friend who whacks you in the back of your head and saying, stop being an idiot. Right? You need a therapist who's like, okay, so you did this, and what did that make you feel? Because is that anger? Is that guilt? Is that helplessness? Is that fear? You need to hear that. You need your partner who's like, I don't care what's going on. I just want to come give you a hug and comfort you, right? And all of these people can't play all these roles. And sometimes what we don't realize is that we need each of these different kinds of people to kind of fill us and hold us when we're not in the best of spaces. So I'm glad that you feel that the therapist allowed you to think in a different kind of way. But don't forget the other people also who stood next to you, whether it was your friend or your partner or your family or even your pet, that also held space for you in those deep, dark times.
There was a belief some time back that once a person retires, crossing the age of 60s or maybe in the 70s, when they get a bit bored is when they get depressed, they don't know nothing to look forward to in life. Then we realize the corporates also, people in the corporate stress, business, promotion, salaries, money, commitments, they are falling into depression as well. Now it's the 20s and in the teens as well who are getting depressed. Can you give us a bit of statistics as to, is it age bound? Is it occupation bound? Or is it the fact that they all don't have hobbies?
It's definitely across all age groups. So taking the few demographics you spoke about. So people who are retired possibly are used to a certain kind of power control. They were all like CEOs, or they were like high high-flying positions, had a certain kind of routine, and then that suddenly changed. And so that change of what their life once was to what it is now can be a place of discomfort for them, which makes them possibly think about their self-worth, their self-confidence. Their children who looked up to them are now kind of giving them advice on what to do. So it's a transitional phase that they're in, right? And when you move to the early 20s, that's also a transitional phase. You're in a little bit of a cocoon where, it's school, college, where your parents are taking care of you, and suddenly you're thrown out into the big bad world and having to figure out life for yourself. You're possibly in your first job, you're possibly in your first relationship, handling money, getting cheated, multiple things that are happening. And all these transitional phases are spaces of discomfort where it can be very, very confusing. And again, I go back to the village that you need. You do need the people that you're like, hey, let's just go for a smoke and figure this out. But when, like you mentioned, the nights are getting longer and darker, then you also possibly need to say, is there somebody else who can kind of help me understand why I'm feeling this way? Right? So I would say each demographic or each population has a specific kind of issue and challenge that they're dealing with. And that's what you need to do.
Today, probably, we don't understand how important a hobby is. And I kind of believe hobby is that one thing you do that you forget the world around you. It gives you joy. It makes you feel yourself, and it's your zone. Today, if I ask so many people, what's your hobby? They say, we don't even have time for a hobby. What are you saying? So, do you kind of believe that the me time has gone missing? What is an ideal day to be happiness proof?
Well, I'm definitely not God. But there is definitely truth to what you're saying, that we're not spending enough time with ourselves for certain, and that's part of what we also kind of try and promote. Sometimes just spending time with yourself. What is a hobby? A hobby is you doing something for yourself. It could be a sport, it could be an art form, it could be reading. Earlier, if you remember the slam books of the old days, collecting coins or collecting stamps was considered like the traditional hobbies. But there's so much that goes into it. You're kind of making sure you're pulling the stamp off carefully from an envelope, making sure it's not tearing. Then you're kind of classifying them. Then you're trying to number them. You're labeling them. You're putting them in those little slots. And what you're doing is, which is now very, let's say, commercially called as, it is a mindful activity that you're doing, which is you're kind of zoning everything out and saying, I'm going to be doing this. So traditionally when people say, go do pottery, what is the purpose of the pottery? Is not this magic in pottery, but what you're doing is you're feeling something with your hands. There's certain dexterity that you're feeling. You're kind of making something out over there. It's messy, it's dirty, and then you need to make some kind of an art form from it. You have to concentrate. You can't be thinking about your next deadline or your next shoot while you're doing that, because then that's going to come out really badly. So there's so many things that you're kind of shutting out to kind of try and do that. And if you've heard of these mandala coloring books, when it first came out, it's a rage, and it's still continuing to do that. It first came out, it was really silly. It's like, why do I need to get a box of crayons and a coloring book? Like, what's wrong with you? But the actual part of it is that you're first looking at this piece of art and you're like, okay, do I put a blue here or a green here? So there's a certain thought process that's going into it. Then you're picking up a crayon or a color pencil, you're feeling it, and you're remembering certain old memories of feeling that. And then you had to concentrate to put it within the lines of it. And then kind of on some level envision what the entire thing will look for. So that I can't just put green and blue wherever I want to. You could, but you have a certain image of what you'd like that to be. So more than the art of it, what you're doing is you're forcefully or mindfully cutting out everything else. You're not thinking about your boss. You're not thinking about what's for dinner. You're not thinking about, I had to go pick my daughter up from school. None of those kind of things. You're cutting out all the noise, which is basically me time. So absolutely, hobbies or anything that you can do for yourself is amazing. And it need not be a very commercial or expensive kind of hobby. You don't need to go do something exotic. It could be, like they say, gardening. For a lot of people, their me time is washing dishes. Because there's a sense of completion, there's a sense of cleanliness, a sense of order. And you're like, you know what, when I go to wash dishes, I'm just there. I'm present. I want to make sure everything is clean and that sink at the end of it looks beautiful.
What would be certain to-dos in a day you think that will give you that happiness and a sense of control of your mind? Is it the way you start your day? Is it your first thoughts or the first activity? Is it what you do midday to make sure that you're in control?
So, again, it's different for different kinds of people, right? And I'm going to kind of maybe use some of the things you told me outside of this talk. Is you told me that you like planning your day. And that means that you like knowing what your day is going to look like the previous night, right? And then you know that you like going to the gym in the morning for an hour. And it's not just about wanting to look good or feel fit. It's also your me time that you're getting there away from everybody else, from the phone ringing or your partner asking you for something or whatever else. And then you kind of roughly know what your day looks like. So it's kind of structured in your head, right? And so you're somebody who likes that kind of structure and likes that kind of organization, which allows you to have a good day, knowing that I can do all of these kind of things. And then when you have a kind of an open slot, you know that you could slot something else into it. But there are a lot of people who may get upset with too much structure and too much order. They tell them, okay, hey, do you need to wake up at 7 a.m. and you have to go to the gym? And if you're somebody who hates going to the gym, then that's a torturous day for you. But then the world and the image tells you that that is what you're supposed to do. So the same day that could be great for you could be a terrible day for them if you had the exact same schedule. So once you understand what kind of makes you happy and what kind of gives you the kind of peace and calm, that would be the best answer to it. So, for example, if I had to give you a personal example, I love making my coffee. And a lot of people give me coffee thinking that, oh, Rohit loves his coffee because I've got everything from like an espresso machine to, mocha pot to whatever else. And the honest truth of it is that 15 minutes when I choose which beans I want, how I grind them, and then put it in the machine, wait for the machine to heat up, to steam it. The entire process and the routine and the ritual of it is what kind of like calms me down for that day. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to go. And with that 15 minutes and the coffee at the end of it is a bonus. Like if I don't do that coffee, I'm making it if you came home and I made it for you, my day has still started well because I got my ritual in. So to answer your question of everything together, one suggestion I would give is try and add certain rituals into your life, which kind of train your mind to tell you that this is what leads me to calm.
Relationships are very important. So you can't say don't get into a relationship, but then how does one handle the not so perfect relationship? And why is most often a failed relationship leading to one or both people getting into depression?
So to answer your question, I think like you mentioned, man is a social animal. Man as a species is a social animal. And there is a big difference between loneliness and being alone as well, right? And what you're kind of talking about is companionship, comfort, safety, trust, all of these things that come in when you're in a specific kind of relationship. You know that you have somebody that you can lean on. You know that there's somebody that you're kind of like journeying with. You know that there's somebody that you can actually be vulnerable with and not wear masks at home, which you need to wear outside as well, right? And so most times what we end up doing is that we end up putting a lot of pressure on our partners as well without realizing it, because we then expect them to play all the roles. We expect them to be the wise sage who knows magically when Rajiv is upset and that they need to stay away. We expect them to be the mother who's like, oh, Rajiv is upset, I know, go give him a hug. You expect them to be the jovial friend who's like, come on, macha, let's have a beer. And you also expect them to be the loving partner who's showering unconditional love on you, without realizing that they're going through their journey and their battles as well at the same kind of time. And then when you have that kind of dependency on your partner and that suddenly goes away, you're suddenly lost. This is like you take a child to, say, an amusement park, and then there's a huge crowd and you lose your mother's hand when you're like 4 years old. You don't know what to do because there's a whole sea of strangers there. And that's the exact kind of feeling you possibly feel when that one person who kind of was holding things together for you suddenly is not there anymore.
So then how does one come out of this? Is there a solution to depression or is it a lifelong battle?
So depression is again a very is a very easily used word over here. But to answer your question of a solution to it, yes, of course, a solution to it. And that comes from thinking inward of like how necessary were some of these kind of things. So how can I cope with these kind of situations better, right? Because these kind of situations, whether it's with a partner, whether it's with your colleague, or whether it's with the outside world, are continuously going to keep happening to you. And an analogy I'd like to use is like stress or stressors are like traffic. If you need to go from here to Nilankare at 5 p.m. in the evening, the traffic is going to be there. How do you cope with that traffic? That 2 hours is going to take you from there to Nilangare will not change. You can be the angry guy slamming on the thing, or you can be the person who's listening to music or listening to Chennai Live on radio. But the person who lands up in Nilangare is a very different person who's cursing and cussing throughout the entire trip versus the person who's like, hey, you know what? I listened to this really nice podcast, or I listened to really nice music. And that's the same thing that we kind of start learning along life. And unfortunately, it is with experience, it is with lived experiences of life, of understanding, of realizing how we can become better human beings and how we can deal with these kind of situations better. So there will be pain, there will be hurt in the beginning, but that's also, and I'm coming back to your thing of a partner, that's also where we kind of learn along with our partner about how we both navigate life together, because we both are flawed. Nobody comes out of the womb perfect, however perfect we look to the outside world. We all have our flaws. And having that understanding with each other, saying, hey, I understand your flaws, and I have a choice of either poking you in your flaws or kind of like holding your hand and saying, okay, this is a tough part, let's jump over this together. However strong, independent, popular, charismatic you are. I'm not talking about you.
I was taking it very personally.
You are. Sometimes we need that kind of support. And in all ways, and not just for men and women, there are many other genders as well that have a lot of other challenges.
What's the ideal relationship between a therapist and the individual? Is it something that happens on a weekly basis, discussions? Is it a long-term commitment when one is going to a therapist? Like, I haven't done this before. Let's assume someone watching says, I would like to give this a try. What do I expect? A daily conversation, a daily update, a weekly communication? And how long would this relationship last, or how long should it ideally last for the betterment of this individual, not the therapist?
I want to give you a little bit of spiel of what I would probably do an exploratory call with potential clients. So usually therapy sessions are between 45 and 60 minutes long. It's completely confidential. Everything that you say in a therapy session is completely confidential, unless I feel that you're at harm to yourself or harm to someone else, or if it's mandated by law. Confidentiality is not broken under any circumstance. And like I was mentioning earlier, everything that's said in a therapy session is, an ideal therapist should be completely objective about it. And I'm going to give a very extreme example. If you come to me tomorrow saying that, as a therapist, you come to me and say that, Rohit, I'm having an affair. My job today is not to tell you whether it's right or wrong. My job is to kind of walk you through what you want to do with that information. Why did you bring that to me? Are you feeling guilt towards your partner? Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling a sense of confusion? And we're going to be dealing with that. And it's also my job to not bring my bias into that kind of a conversation, right? In terms of frequency of it, we generally say that not to have more than one session a week. And the reason we do that is that, today you and I share something very personal. You know how the mind is. It's like a monkey. Tomorrow you'll be like, oh, this is the best answer I need. And day after you're going to be like, oh, actually, you know what? I could be thinking about that. So you need for it to kind of settle down before we have our next conversation and take that kind of further. The duration of this is really, really dependent on the severity and the intensity of the challenge that you're kind of going through. So my ideology in therapy is that you don't need therapy sessions anymore. You're able to understand these patterns for yourself. You're able to see some of these things on your own, and you eventually don't need that kind of hand-holding or support. So I have clients who come to me weekly. I have clients who come to me once a month, some who come to me once in 2 months, some who have an SOS session. They're like, hey, you know what? There's a family emergency and I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Can I have an emergency session? There are some clients who are extremely overwhelmed who may have more than one session a week because they're not able to cope at that kind of time. So the frequency of it would also change, but an ideal frequency is once a week, which then kind of gets tapered off till you don't need that anymore.
No, and I can see a very big challenge in what you do. I wouldn't call it a job also. I would never dare to call this a job. But I think you have to have such emotions that you understand them so well, but still you can't be so emotional that you break down or succumb to it. So it's a very sticky line that you are on. But, mind is too individualistic. What gives me happiness, the levels of happiness can be very, very different. So just like trying to balance out life and give everybody an equal scale to understand where we stand, a physical checkup always, when you go to a hospital, say, okay, I want to check diabetes, I want sugar, I want to check my heart. There's a standard way of doing it. With technology coming so advanced and able to solve everything, do we actually have a mental checkup where we know, okay, you're just sad, you're slightly confused, no, you're depressed? So do we have a wavelength like that or a check like that that says, this is how your mind is? Give me science, don't give me emotions.
Yes, there are definitely a lot of assessments, clinical assessments that are there. So even to actually use the word depressed or has anxiety or whatever else, there are certain assessments that a trained professional would do. Like, for example, I'm not ethically qualified to diagnose someone with depression or anxiety because I'm a counseling psychologist. You would need to go to a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist to get diagnosed. And there are definitely different kinds of assessments for that. A lot of workspaces do have certain kinds of emotional well-being assessments and things which are a combination of a lot of these assessments in a very much softer kind of approach. The clinical efficacy of it is something that I'm not fully aware of. But to answer your question, there isn't just like a checkup that you can go and do. Unfortunately not, that I'm aware of.
Do you see that coming soon with technology?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there is, I feel, a little more old school. I think it's a combination of multiple things that would need to be added to come into it. There are multiple assessments. A lot of mental health companies have certain kinds of brief free assessments online, mood assessments and so on. Sometimes it's as simple as the 5 emojis, and tracking the 5 emojis for 1 month can tell you what your mood's been like. So if you're like in neutral for the entire month, there's a high possibility that there's something more deeper there. Or you're sad the entire month, there's a high possibility there's something deeper there. So it could be simple solutions like that, but what is tested, what can be mass prescribed or whatever else is something to be seen. There isn't a one answer at this point that I'm aware of, at least.
Well, going back to a bit of philosophy, as you've been talking about, philosophy has a lot to do with the way we think, right? So they say detachment is a very, very good form of keeping yourself peaceful and happy. If we were to understand that and take it on the other side of it and find its opposite, would we say that attachment or addiction has a lot to do with how upset your mind is? Addiction is something that we don't realize how dangerous it could be. It could be addiction to the cup of coffee, it could be addiction to an individual, it could be to cigarettes, it could be to alcohol. If one is addicted to something, is that a danger sign or a red flag that you're saying if you're addicted to this, you're very, very probable to get into a stage of mental imbalance?
Absolutely.
If it's snatched away? What's that connection? Addiction, attachment, and mental wellness?
Absolutely, because let's take the easy examples of, say, smoking or alcohol, right? They're all coping mechanisms, and you're trying to detach your mind from a thought that's coming to you. So the fact that, say there's a breakup or say there's like a toxic work situation that's going on, you going in the evening and having those many drinks to kind of forget about it is leading to a certain kind of addiction, because you're like seeking that kind of forgetting that you're looking for. And it's a classic avoidant behavior and a coping strategy. But coping strategies are always band-aid situations. I can cope for that day. The next day morning, the work and the breakup is still going to be there. Are you going to drink the entire day? And that's when the problem happens. You start drinking to keep forgetting continuously. And that definitely leads to certain kinds of issues and are also symptoms of a deeper mental illness that you could potentially have, for certain.
Fantastic. I think we've kind of covered a lot about the mind. I'm assuming we've done fair justice to all of this. But like we said, the mind is too vast a topic for each one to speak about or understand. Finally, we all have mood swings through the day. Sometimes we wake up and we're happy for no reason. Sometimes we wake up, we feel a bit sluggish, tired. It could be the body, it could be the mind. What would you say that if a person is facing this consistently, if the way you react to certain things, if the way you feel for certain things, if you're having this over a period of time, whether it's a couple of days or a couple of weeks, then get to a therapist because you need a therapist. What would that be? What would those big signs be?
So I think the classic signs are, of course, sleep. If you feel you're not sleeping enough or you're having disturbed sleep for certain, if you feel your appetite's changing, if you feel like you're having repetitive thoughts that are looping continuously, feelings of, you're questioning your self-worth, feelings of hopelessness, if you feel like there are certain dependencies or coping mechanisms that you're doing, you have increased your smoking, you're looking at, other dependencies like say alcohol or recreational drugs, all of those are like symptoms to tell you something is not okay. Or if there are people who are around you who are like, you know what, you don't seem fine, or you're looking a little lost. If you feel like you're switching off, I was using this example the other day. If you feel like you're scrolling on the phone a lot, and that's also you just like constantly scrolling, you're not even absorbing it, but you need some kind of stimulation to avoid the other thoughts from coming in, right? Or another classic example, if you feel repeatedly, and I use the example a lot in some of my sessions, a lot of people say they watch Friends, the TV show, a lot. They watch it 100 times, they're going to watch it again because they know what's going to happen. And that's their way to unwind is what they're saying. But that also is, there's some research which shows that's also a symptom to say that you're actually very, very anxious or overwhelmed or burnt out, that you don't want any new stimulation. I know that this character is going to do this, and so that's easy to do or to watch. And so that's also one of the reasons why it's one of the most watched shows. I think it is the most watched show in the world or whatever else. So if you feel you're doing those kind of things repeatedly, then maybe have a conversation. And what I also like saying is you don't need to wait. A physical example is that, if you bust your knee or you have a toothache, you're going to go to a doctor because you can physically see blood coming or you can feel the pain. But internally, we're so conditioned to not talk about it that we're like, I know I'll snap out of it. I'm going to go hit the gym, I'm going to play a sport, and I'll be fine. But if you're not getting fine, then get the support. Because sometimes it's not that you need to wait for you to completely break down, because then building that back up is much harder. And the worst thing that could happen, I say, is that you're just going to become a better version of yourself. Like, I've gone to my therapist saying that I don't know how to do this well. And it's not like a serious mental health illness. And I need to figure out how to deal with this challenge. I have so many clients who come to me to deal with procrastination or when I get, or anger, for example. And while the anger may not be very extreme, they're like, I don't want to get angry. Why am I getting angry like this? And once you kind of understand why you're getting angry, it's easier to stop it than to do, say, a breathing exercise immediately the moment you get angry, right? So figuring all of that out would help you understand things better.
Fantastic. Rohit, it was a conversation which we've had mental experts come here and they speak a lot about breathing. They speak a lot about meditation, mindfulness. You went outside those boundaries. We spoke a lot about interpersonal relationships and a lot more that was covered. If people want to reach out to you, how does one get in touch with you?
My website is the place. It's my name, ROHITKOLIYOT.com. There's details to get in touch with me there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And on Mental Health Awareness Month, all right, what is the biggest myth that we have about the mind or mental health? What is the craziest thing that people believe, but you're saying that's not about the mind or about the mental health? What's the biggest myth? And you say this is not what it is.
Anything can be fixed. The mind is your best friend and your worst enemy. It can make you believe the worst things, but it also has the power to make you believe the best things and make you the best possible version of yourself. So if you're willing to invest some time in yourself, I don't know, the sky, the universe, there's no limit.
Fantastically put, and pun intended. Thank you for speaking your mind out. It was a pleasure having you put insights about men and women and the other genders, as you kept specifying so nicely and so beautifully. It was a very inclusive topic about the mind and the heart. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Rohit, for coming and speaking about mental health awareness. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Rajiv. Thank you.
This is Chennai Live, Radio Redefined.